All right, we are back for a either a segment or special edition of Seminole Sidelines. We are taping this on Tuesday. It may be posted later today. It may be interlaced with our live show on Seminole Sidelines on Wednesday. You'll know when you hear it, right? But I am joined by the most famous recruiting analyst in the state of Florida, Charles Fishbein. And as you guys listen to us on a regular basis, know that we call him Fish. Fish, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Well, you are a man full of knowledge on most days, but after your weekend in Miami, which is the mecca of college basketball, by the way, FAU and Miami are turning the state of Florida into a basketball state. But what is the sense of excitement in South Florida surrounding the Final Four? Let's start with that. Then we'll get back to football.
Hey, listen, once these teams start winning down here, that bandwagon fills up real quick. Everybody's a fan. Guys that never went to a Miami game all of a sudden are fans of that team. So, yeah, they win a championship, you'll be hearing about it.
Shoot, they might sell out Hard Rock Stadium if they put the basketball team in there. Maybe they should switch venues down there. Yeah. All right, so you were first of all, before we get into the Miami Rivals camp, you saw a ton of kids. We're gonna move all around position from position, but we do have some couple of news items that are breaking over the last 12 hours. Obviously, there was a new offer that went out by Florida State. They offered 2024 linebacker prospect Jalen Parrish from Delray Beach Atlantic High School. He's 6'2", about 220. Fish, you've done an eval on him. I watched him. He is a physical downhill linebacker, closes quickly and well on the ball, particularly in between the tackles. Plays a little bit high at times, and what you'd like to see really more on that highlight film is can he be a sideline-to-sideline player? He does run pretty well in pass coverage, but you just don't see enough of that making plays outside the box to see how well he runs and how much space he can cover. But just your thoughts on the offer to Jalen Parrish at a position, obviously, that Florida State is lighter at than most.
Yeah, I think the comp could be like, the Deloge kid that's at FSU now, kind of similar type of player. Guys that can play in space, but you don't want to have to put them in space if you have to against a big tight end or wide receiver that can stretch the field. It's just a mismatch no matter what. If you do have a linebacker that can cover those guys, they're first-round picks. They're going to make a lot of money because that's just the way the game is now. Most guys that are playing linebacker, they don't really play that position in high school. This kid does. He is a downhill kid that can play between the tackles, very sound against the run. That high school's produced a lot of talent. You go back to the days of Preston Parker played at Florida State. Atlantic's a school that usually those kids do pan out once they go to college, which is a nice thing, is that you'll go to these pipeline schools, and a lot of them, I'm not going to mention a name, but there's some that have a lot of hype kids that never pan out. This seems like one of those schools that usually when you take someone from that program, they do make it at the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, they've offered a ton of linebackers. They had three-star linebacker Monte Whedon on campus, both very similar players. Both ball carriers move backwards when these guys hit them. So obviously, as you and I well know, linebacker is probably going to be one of the primary. I mean, listen, they're all important, right? There's no unimportant position in recruiting, but obviously we know Florida State needs to build their numbers at that position. Particularly with where they are right now. But all right, so you're at the Rivals camp. I'm going to get into a lot of the offensive and defensive linemen because that is what you have posted on our message board, your first report, and you will be coming out with more reports from Miami on the Rivals camp at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. You can go to either one of those two places. It'll take you to the same place, and then go to our premium recruiting board, and you'll get all of Fish's notes. But you did start with the offensive and defensive linemen. But who stood out to you? I mean, we'll dive into the offensive and defensive linemen here in a second. But overall, who were some of the top standouts at the camp?
Yeah, sticking to the linebacker position, Charquez Lee, he's a kid out of Miami Palmetto now. He played at LaSalle High School. I really liked his film last year He's just starting to get some Division I offers. I think he's a kid that could go to the Florida State camp and get offered. He's about 6'1". I think he measured in a little over 6'1". But just how you want the kids to look. I mean, very broad shoulders, has the ability to put on extra weight. He was one of the more athletic guys at the camp. These are the type of kids that kind of get overlooked. Florida State's done a really good job with these type of kids under Norvell, finding these type of kids and then producing. I think he's one of the guys that could go to the FSU or Miami or Florida camp and get offered by those schools because there's so few quality linebackers. Another linebacker that FSU has offered is Ezekiel Marcelin out of Miami Central. You just turn on the film, he's as good of a linebacker that's come out of South Florida in the last 10 years. He's very similar to the linebacker out of Miami Central a couple of years ago that FSU went head-to-head with Miami, and Miami ended up winning that battle. I think Marcelin's been on campus at Florida State, and he's someone that they are recruiting. He's a 2025 prospect, but he looks different. He looked different as far as the way his movement, how he's very sudden. He can change directions. You know how linebackers sometimes they can run backwards, but then you try to have them flip their hips and try to come back forwards. That transition, it's not like a DB or somebody. They struggle with it. This kid doesn't. He's kind of like a pinball. He can change direction. He's going to be a priority for a lot of programs, especially a school like Florida State. They're going to want a kid like this.
Yeah, and he was on campus, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and for one of their – I think he might have been here for Legacy Weekend. I can't remember the exact weekend, but, yeah, he has been on campus. All right, everyone's always fascinated by quarterbacks, right? So were there any quarterbacks at the camp that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback position, it's you had some kids there. Will Griffin was there. He's a kid that FSU's offered. He kind of is like a Tim Tebow type, more of a runner, an athlete than an overall quarterback. Riley Trujillo, I believe he committed to one of the programs. He won like one of the top quarterbacks.
Yeah, he committed to UCF last week.
Yeah, I mean, he looked good. There's a few other guys. It's kind of there's no elite quarterbacks in the state of Florida this year. Overall, the guys are all more probably, hey, come to camp. Let's see how you do. And maybe they're a second option at the quarterback position. But overall, it wasn't one of the better quarterback days that you'll see at a camp.
Now, Griffin is an underclassman, and I believe he's from Tampa. And as you mentioned, he is kind of he's built more like a linebacker than he is a quarterback. Florida State, is interested in him. How fluid was he as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like if he was going to play another position, he'd be an H-back or a tight end. He's he's tight in the hips and everything. Yeah. I think he's a little mechanical as far as when he throws and stuff. I definitely think he's someone that has ability, but he's definitely going to have to be developed as a quarterback.
All right. Well, listen, you did focus on the offensive and defensive linemen. Your top performer at the entire camp, or the top offensive line performer, was Jimothy Lewis of Bradenton IMG. Just kind of give us your thoughts on Jimothy and not only what he looked like on Sunday, but where you think he is with Florida State.
Yeah, I think Florida State has a legit shot at him. He was on campus last year for their summer camp. They're going to have to get him back on campus again this spring and over the summer. He's just so impressive. He's fluid. He lost some weight. He's very athletic. He's long. He changes direction. I was talking to one coach, and I've talked to you about this. He anticipates when a rush edge guy goes up the field on him and then comes back inside. He's already made the movement inside before the defensive end has made the movement. He just is a very fluid, athletic offensive tackle. These are the guys you want. I think he's a no-brainer. He's a guy that could probably come in as a redshirt freshman and start at a lot of programs. He may even be able to start as a freshman, but you know how that is. He's the top guy on my board. The next guy that I thought was in that same group was Eddie Pierre-Louis. He's a kid out of Tampa Catholic. FSU's had some traction. I don't think they've gone after him real hard. One of the issues with Eddie was when you saw him listed on these websites, you saw 340, 350, maybe 360. So when you see a kid that big listed, you're like, all right, is he a big, sloppy type kid? He came to the camp, and he's just a big kid. I mean, he's just big and physical. There was one point where one kid, him and the other kid got kind of into it. He's like, let's go. Let's get another rep. You think you could beat me? Let's go. So he has that competitive edge to him. That was really impressive to me. But I thought he did real well for a guy that size. I don't know if he's a tackle. He maybe to play. I know a lot of the SEC schools that are recruiting him are probably recruiting him as a tackle because he's big, tall kid. He's probably more of an interior guy at the next level, but he has the traits to play both. He lined up at center, guard, and tackle at the camp. So I think he's shown some versatility to his game.
Did they do any pass pro, and what were your thoughts on his lateral movement if they did?
Yeah, he moved well laterally, which is surprising for a guy that's 340 pounds. You expect him to have heavy feet. He didn't. He moved well. I do think he needs to trim down. If he could get into that 320, 325 pound range, it'll be better for him and whoever recruits him that he gets. I don't think 350, 360 will be ideal for him just because of, these schools now run so many darn plays. You're talking some schools want to run 100 plays now when they're on offense. And I don't, at 350, 360, he's going to be pushing a lot of weight and a lot of plays. He'll be gassed in a lot of games.
Yeah, I don't know. At that weight, you probably don't want to go play for a tempo offense, right?
Yeah.
And, maybe Mike's not a tempo guy. He'll run tempo from time to time, but it's not the that's not how he's going to make his living on offense. Unlike a Tennessee, so maybe that will give Florida State a competitive advantage because he sounds like a mauler, he's built like a mauler, and Florida State, Mike loves to run the ball. In fact, the kid they had out of Illinois this weekend, the 4-star offensive tackle Marquise Easley from Kankakee, Illinois.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Wait till I play that for my wife. She's gonna like that.
Yeah. He mentioned that FSU ran his favorite play 12 times, which is the GT counter, guard tackle counter. Maybe the offensive system fits Eddie Pierre-Louis here at Florida State a little bit better than some of the other schools he's considering. And listen, he does have an extensive offer list. We've got him at 52 offers at Rivals. So
he's probably ate half of them up. So
yeah. So all right. So you also mentioned Zaire Addison. I believe that's how you pronounce the name, from Riverview Sumner High School.
Yep.
He's a 2025, but obviously stood out to you. He's the third guy you mentioned.
Yeah, he did a lot of reps against David Stone, who's the number one, I think, defensive lineman in the country, or at least in the state of Florida, 5-star kid. And he held his own. You could see that his base needs to get a little stronger. Like when Stone kind of bull rushed him, he'd get off balance a little bit and had to recalibrate and try to get back on balance. But you could see the physical talent, his ability to move laterally, his hands. He's very good at hands, like kind of moving guys where he wants them to go. The physical talent's there. Just needs to get a little bigger and stronger. He's a 2025 kid, I believe, so there's time for him to grow. He was one of the better kids. And speaking with him, very nice kid. You could tell he's going to be a very coachable player at the next level. Looks you in the eye. One of those guys that you want to recruit to your program. I think he's going to have basically anybody in the that he wants. Those offers are going to come from everywhere, from the ACC, SEC, Big Ten. Wherever he wants to go, he'll have his choice of schools.
All right, Fish, you've mentioned David Stone. Obviously, he's one of the top defensive linemen in this class. Kind of talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on him.
Yeah, originally I was saying is this kid's a super aggressive, violent kid. Physically, I don't know where he plays, if he's a 3-4 S rush, and do you move him inside? Because the way his body's built, he doesn't really have a position that you'd play him at. Most D tackles are kind of wide in the bottom. You want those guys that are like 320. I don't think he's going to be a 320 kid. I think he'll be more like a 290, 295, maybe like a Broderick Bunkley, a guy that Florida State fans will remember played for Florida State back in the day. He's very violent, very quick off the ball. I can see why he's a 5-star player. He was one of the best defensive linemen at the camp and probably one of the better ones in the nation.
All right. You also mentioned Booker Pickett from Wharton High School in Tampa.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about Booker.
Booker Pickett, I think he's kind of like Lamont Green's kid. Very thin right now, but you can see he has a frame to put on the weight. He's going to be a stand-up rush end. I don't think he's going to be a hand in the dirt type defensive end. I think he's going to play that hybrid position. I don't know what Florida State calls it, but he'll play that rush end, got to come off the ball, put pressure on the quarterback. I think he's athletic enough to move into coverage, maybe cover a tight end. He's real long and athletic. He's got a lot of juice when he comes off that ball, very twitchy. I think he's a kid that it's going to take him time because he's thin. He's probably about 200 pounds. He's going to have to put on the weight, get bigger and stronger. He's probably a guy that's going to probably have to redshirt or maybe just play a handful of games his freshman year. And you'll see more once he gets into a college weight program and he gets to 240, 245. He's going to be one of those guys that's unstoppable.
All right, a couple more guys. You talked about Danielson Exuma from Miami Edison, Jake Krull from Bishop Moore, and Jarquez Carter from Newberry. Just out of those three guys, kind of to sum it up and wrap up what you saw from the offensive and defensive line. Just talk a little bit about those three guys.
Yeah, the Danielson Exuma, he's new to the game. Big, long, tall. He plays high in the drills that he did when he was playing on the defensive line. He played high. He's going to have to learn some better techniques, stay low. He gives his body up. He's so big, tall, and long and he just shoots off the ball real high that I think all the offensive linemen at the camp were kind of able to kind of neutralize him. But you can see the physical talent. I think once he gets some college coaching and learns some technique, learns how to play at that level, he's a guy down the road, could be a very good player. Jake Krull, I don't want to call him the next, Nick Bosa, but that's what he looks like Nick looked like in the ninth grade. He's a kid that's super quick off the ball, very explosive. I know he did really well at the Under Armour Combine. He went against Jimothy Lewis and did struggle a little bit because Jimothy had the ability athletically to handle his speed rush, and his length just neutralized him. But you're talking a kid that's a 2026 kid that, he's going to get
a long way to go.
He's going to get a lot better. He's someone that I think has a ton of potential to be a very good player. The Jarquez Carter kid, Newberry, the last time FSU went to Newberry, they landed 2 kids out of that high school. It's in Gainesville. One thing is he came, performed better than, I thought he would perform. He did very well. He's still another year away from getting to that top tier level. Right now, he's probably a group of 5, lower level P5 kid. But you're talking a big athletic kid, another one, and those guys are hard to find. So you got to figure the Power 5 schools will come after him. There is one kid that, to me, I put him down as a sleeper, Wilnerson Telemack. What's funny is I went and watched him in the drills. His coach at Pace was standing next to me. I said, listen, I think your kid's not a D tackle. I think you guys got to convince him to play left tackle. That's his natural spot. And the coach goes, do you want to come to school on Monday? We've been telling him this for 2 years. So that's what how that goes. Some of these kids, they usually need a play where you project them, not where they think they're going to play, because that's usually where they're going to play in college.
Good. And then you mentioned another Marshland. I guess I don't know whether they're all related or not, but Gavich Marshland, a weak side defensive end prospect from Miami. Yeah. You mentioned him. Obviously, he's a guy that, as far as we know, does not have a Florida State offer, but you were at least somewhat impressed with what you saw from him. So we'll wrap it up with him. And just what are your thoughts on he plays it, I believe.
He plays at Baylor Jesuit. Yeah. He's been playing starting since his freshman year. I think he's one of those kids that once he does the summer circuit, he has all the abilities. He's another hybrid player, can play D end, outside rush end, kind of like the Booker Pickett kid, has a ton of talent. I think he's a guy that's flown under the radar, but I don't think that's going to be the same after this summer. you're going to see his offer list grow, and he could possibly get a Florida State offer at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there's one other guy I do want to talk to you about. He's a FSU legacy. He's been on campus several times. Does not have an offer from Florida State. Has an offer from Miami. Offers from Florida. A lot of people are recruiting this kid, Joseph Ionata. He's a guy to me that's just as impressive as some guys that do hold FSU offers. What were your thoughts on Joseph Ionata?
Yeah, Joseph's a guy that I would not want to get a fight in a phone booth because I know people don't know what phone booths are because everybody has an iPhone, but it's what people used to go in to make calls when they didn't have iPhones. He's a guy that I would not want to get in a fight with. I mean, he was roughing kids up at the camp. He's very physical with his hands. He's not the most physically gifted kid. He's not a 6'5", 300-pound lineman, but sometimes you need these guys that just love football. You could tell he wanted to keep repping out, and he beat kids up at the camp. I mean, he was physically getting into their body, and he's like a body puncher. He just keeps coming after you, coming after you, coming after you. He's like I'd call him a pit bull, man. He just is nasty, and I think he's a guy that could play center, guard, and be very effective in college.
Yeah, and just so for people that do not know, these kids are not wearing pads. This is in shorts and T-shirts, so usually, if you're willing to mix it up in shorts and T-shirt, you will certainly mix it up when you get the pads on. So anyway, yeah, that's a kid whose film I have been very impressed with. All right, Fish, so tell us, obviously, you've got your offensive and defensive line report on our message boards at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. What do you got coming up for us later in the week?
We're going to talk about corners, the linebackers. I'll put some stuff out there, but mainly DBs, some of the wide receivers, two guys that some of the guys that look good. Winston Watkins, who's committed now to Colorado, and Dion. He was a kid that Florida State had gotten on campus a few times. Jafar Jean Noel and Malachi Tony are two guys that go to American Heritage. The Tony kid does have offers from Florida State. Both of these guys are probably more slot receivers. And a kid that was on campus recently, Ryan Mack. He was one of the guys I wrote. I didn't know who he was at the camp because there's so many darn DBs. I just wrote numbers down. He was the first number I wrote down of anybody. And then I went back and looked at my list. It was him. He was very impressive at the camp. I think he can play corner, safety. He's a guy that I know Florida State has offered recently. His dad, Rod Mack, I believe, played at the University of Miami back in the day, but that legacy stuff really doesn't seem to matter much anymore. These kids just play wherever they want to go, and dad just has to sit back and watch. But there's a lot of kids. One of the sleeper running backs for 2025, maybe even 2026, is Javian Mallory. He's from West Boca. He had a very good camp. He's about a 6 foot, probably 210, 215 pound back, kind of the type of guys that Norvell likes. It'll be interesting. But talking to his coach, the Georgia's, Alabama, some of the SEC schools are already inquiring about him. So he's a name to remember and put on the radar as far as a future prospect.
All right. Well, Fish, we appreciate it as always. It's been a very busy weekend recruiting-wise, not only for Florida State, but for Fish and myself. It was Mac was on campus this weekend, and we actually have a article from him talking about his experience at Florida State this weekend. So, like I said, if you're a listener or a viewer and you are watching this or listening, but you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. It'll take you to the same place. Fish will have his recruiting notebooks posted on the premium recruiting board throughout the week, talking about what happened in Miami. And, of course, we've got one-on-one interviews with a vast majority of the high-profile kids that were on campus making unofficial visits to Florida State this weekend and checking out the team's first scrimmage. As always, we appreciate you listening to Seminole Sidelines, and we will be back later in the week. Thanks for listening.